In this episode, Golden and I discuss Mythic Quest Season 2, Full Speed Ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 130. I'm your host, Oren Merton. We've already talked about Mythic Quest, which streams on Apple TV Plus, on this podcast. We loved Season 1, and we were really excited about Season 2. Our discussion is pretty much spoiler-free, so if you haven't watched the season yet, you're good to go. And let's get to it. I am here with Golden to talk about Mythic Quest Season 2. We've talked about Season 1, though interestingly, when we talked about it, we didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic and there was going to be a pandemic episode, but it was actually one of the better pandemic episodes, that kind of Zoom TV, if you will. I think they did it incredibly well. It captured both the characters as we'd gotten to know and love them in Season 1. It was funny and it had some real poignancy in there. Then they had another special right before Season 2, and those two shows capped off Season 1 after we did our Season 1 episode on the Omega Beam, and now we have all of Season 2. So what did you think of Season 2?
It was very good. It was definitely, I think, different, because I think there was definitely a focus for the first season, Raven's Banquet, and that was the focus, and you're getting to know the characters. And then Season 2 went a little bit deeper into who the characters were and the dynamics of running the business and going to the next stage in game development.
Right. Yeah, in the first season, like you said, Raven's Banquet was the focus. And one of the main story drivers this season was what will be the focus, that what will be the quote-unquote new expansion. And I think a lot of game companies go through that they have a hit on their hands, and then it's the question of, okay, how do we keep this going? And I think they handle it in what is, of course, a very funny way, because this is a comedy, or at the very least a dramedy, but at the same time, it does it with enough groundedness and enough real human emotion that it's not just funny and it's not just amusing to laugh at archetypes from this industry, but real poignancy about mixed up, messed up characters who are trying to do their best.
Definitely. I mean, that and finding who they are and what they want to do.
Yeah.
What drives them.
Yeah. And who is vulnerable and open about what their deal is, so to speak, and who's more guarded and more closed. And sometimes a character will act one way to hide something, and other times they act one way because that's really who they are through and through. And either way, it's both rife for comedy and rife for poignant moments. And I don't think any show can be as successful, critically successful. I have no idea how successful this is as a streaming show for Apple TV Plus. I think it's pretty good because I see advertisements for it all over, and its Rotten Tomatoes was 100%, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's watched by a ton of people. But for it to be as creatively successful as it is, I think you've got to have both. And I think it comes across on screen, because I think there really is a sense that we're all in this together.
And it's very much, what's happening right now. I mean, they have their quarantine episode where you talked about. Then they have a Welcome Back to the Office kind of thing, their annual Everlight, which is technically part of Season 1. And then with Season 2, you still didn't have F. Murray Abraham back for a little while.
Right.
So maybe they weren't quite sure about having him on set.
Right.
Or
yeah.
Was it just, was it to be safe, or just he couldn't make it? But kind of continuing with, there's a lot of people that are still working from home.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the strengths of this show. Many shows have simply ignored the pandemic, that sort of 2020 is the lost year, and they're just not mentioning it. Their stories don't reflect it. They're just picking up where they left off as if it never happened. And I can see the reasons for doing that. You don't want to sort of pigeonhole your stories as, oh, these took place in this year, necessarily, depending on what kind of show it is. If you're, say, a superhero show that's supposed to be more just about, moral allegories and things like that, maybe you don't want to link it directly to a actual event in Earth. I mean, they don't go into major earthquakes in various regions or political unrest or whatever
they tap into there's an episode called Please Sign Here, but they also tap into the fact that at one point, Poppy and Ian are in the office, and she can say something, she can get away with it.
Right.
But he can't, because he's a guy.
Right.
But she shouldn't be able to get away with it either. And even Dana even says to her like that, you're not supposed to say it like that. You can't. And she just doesn't get it.
Right. Yeah. This show very strongly acknowledges
there are issues.
Yeah. That our world as it is. And I think it works. I think it works for the show. I think the fact that it is a contemporary show makes it, I think, resonate even more. So without going into spoilers about what where the series goes, I did want to talk about just two things. One was how in first season, for one episode, they completely went outside the characters of the show to show the history of kind of the space that they were in and the Canadian capital company that was sponsoring these games. And then they did that again this season, but with a 2-show arc. And this time, they made it about the F. Murray Abraham character. And I thought those were really interesting shows because they really gave you depth on a character that you didn't know much about, that was kind of comic relief for season 1, and you really got to know him in season 2. And I think that was just a great arc and a great idea to go outside. And the other thing I wanted to mention is they do not take this show where you think it's going. I always like when a show goes in a direction I have no idea where it's going. And so that impressed me as well.
Yeah, I liked the backstory a lot, but I also like the rift. I think it's called the rift or something like that. I'm not looking at the list right now. And there's this rift in the office, which I'm sure takes place in real offices and, with games, that someone has the idea of the game being developed one direction and someone else wants the game to go in a different direction.
Sure.
I hope that there's a season 3. I really enjoy the characters. Danny Pudi is just wonderful as Brad, having now seen Community, to see these two kind of diametrically opposed characters, but they also do have some similarities. And I love Carol, the character of Carol, who's always just trying to keep the office. She's there to help, and the episode where she's just trying to get them to sign.
Right. It's
like, what do I have to do to get you to sign? I just need you to sign this. And it's like, no, I don't want to solve your problems. Why are you coming to me? That's not my job.
Yeah, Carol is great. And like you said, Danny Pudi. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/130. If you liked this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's those reviews that help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any suggestions or comments, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.